This is the EVP Podcast. It's the EVP Podcast, everybody, with your host, Ghosty.
And I'm Beaker.
And that's it. Mm-hmm. Back to the usual.
Just the two of us. I'm sure we've done this before.
Way too many.
Deja vu.
Well, we are back. And I'm awake this time.
Yes. We hope you enjoyed the episode that we did last week more tand Ghosty did.
And
you actually stayed awake for it.
I went through a lot last weekend and I survived it and I'm still hurting.
You went and saw a chiropractor.
Just now, and I feel better.
Good. And now you're relaxed and you're running this show, so if you fall asleep, there's problems.
Yeah, if I fall asleep, then I definitely got problems.
Okay.
But this week, we are going to Shepton Mallet Prison in Somerset, England.
England?
Queensland. Queen's country.
That's the King's country now.
King's country now. Yeah, you're right, because there's a King of England now.
King Charles, I think.
And this place is the oldest prison in England.
When it closed down in 2013, it was the oldest active prison.
Yeah, the oldest active prison, but it's been open since 1624. So This is obviously haunted based off of European standards.
Yes, by the EVP standards of European history, it is over 400 years old.
Which means haunted.
It's haunted.
Standard.
I actually think it had to be 500 for European.
Actually, you're right. But you know what? This is still haunted as shit because it was a prison.
It was a prison, so yes.
And you know what? Our prison
I think prisons get a 50-year rule.
Our prison here in Utah wasn't even 100. It was still haunted.
Yeah. Prisons are breaking the haunted rules.
Yeah, you know what? There's a lot going on. I
don't think they understand.
I think hospitals should do the same.
I don't think they understand the EVP guidelines for haunting.
There's bendable rules.
The rules are bendable. A little flexible when it comes to hospitals and prisons and pretty much any.
But yeah, you're right. This place just barely closed down in 2013, so just 10 years ago. And this thing is already over 400 years old, and it was still operating up until about 10 years ago. That's nuts.
Except for that brief little 10-year window in the 30s.
There was a little hiatus.
Yeah. They're like, you know what, we're done.
Yeah. But now it's a museum and they do ghost hunts there. But it's still standing and it's still haunted as shit.
Yes.
And so yeah, like I was saying, it was built around 1624, 1625s. It's operational. And at the end of the first English Civil War in 1646, the prison was already needing some fixer-uppers things going on there. But they had men, women, and children all staying together.
Yeah.
Like they were locking up. They didn't have men's cells and women's cells. Like they had big pens and they just threw everybody together.
Oh, and they didn't separate you on the severity of your crime either.
No.
They did an episode there of Paranormal Lockdown back in 2018. The tour guide Paul was saying something like, you could have a murderer in the cell with a 4-year-old boy that stole an apple from a farmer.
Yeah. Yeah, they could have rapists locked up with women and children.
Yeah, they didn't care. They would have these cells that were probably the size of a janitor's closet. They weren't very big, and they would shove up to 14 people in one cell.
Right. And they didn't check on anybody. The doctors didn't check on anybody unless they died.
Basically, once you got imprisoned here, your life expectancy was about 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody was pretty much just withering away.
And they didn't really have
disease.
A cemetery, so if you died, you were basically just buried wherever they had room to put you.
I think they had something out back that they just kind of threw everybody in.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's a hole back there. Let's see, what else? They had, the conditions, let's see. 1790, the prison was expanded. And that's when they finally separated the women and men. 1790. So
it only took 150 years.
Yeah, just 150 years. But, yeah, they didn't check on anybody. They even had, what was it, the governor's mansion up there on the prison? Did you see something about that?
I did not.
Oh, man.
That wouldn't surprise me. It's not the only place where,
But then they ended up improving it again. They ended up having more improvements done in 1822. And that's when they created that tread wheel. Did you see the thing about the tread wheel? It was like a giant wheel,
More or
made
less
of
like
wood,
a hamster wheel,
hamster wheel that humans walked on.
or kind of like what we know as a treadmill nowadays. They would have just a big, like, treadmill type thing, and that was a form of punishment that they would put people on these wheels or on these
10
treadmills.
hours.
Yeah, to help power the prison.
Yep. So yeah, it was
This
like
is where the modern day treadmill comes from.
yeah, it was like a turbine.
It was a torture device that we now use to get in shape.
So speaking of that, so when this place was with their executions for the really bad prisoners, the way they would do their executions, they had three ways. You had your hangings, you had your firing squad, and then you could be hung, drawn, and quartered.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
I like that one.
So when you're hung, drawn, and quartered, I always had this idea that the horses would take off and that would just kind of rips you apart. That's not how it happens.
Oh, okay.
So what they do is they just kind of walk the horses away and keep walking the horses away until bones start breaking.
Oh, no.
And so they'll usually end up breaking their arms, their legs, and their backs will break. And then they're still alive, okay? And then they hang them. While they're alive, they're hanging them, and to the point of almost dying. And then they drop them to keep them alive. And I'm pretty sure they drop them pretty hard. They
Probably.
I mean, things are already broken. Then that's when they decide, and for men, they remove their testicles.
Oh, okay.
And then they disembowel them. Still alive. Testicles taken off while they're still alive. Disemboweling done while they're still alive. And then they let them bleed out and die. No. They take their head off.
Oh, okay.
Then they take off their head, and then they quarter them. And then with their head, they put them on a spike. To be like, don't you guys do anything like this guy did.
That's just for the really bad people, right?
Yeah, that's the bad people. That's more of your rebellious people. There's
Wait,
always going to be the rebellions.
The rebellious people are the bad people?
Well, not always, but
Not the
to the
murderous
king.
people?
To the king, yeah.
It's treason.
But yeah, you're going to have your murderers and rapists, but I'm pretty sure the king's men are murderers and rapists as well.
Most likely.
So it depends on what side you're on, pretty much.
Who's got the money?
So
Wow, things don't change in politics at all.
not at all. But yeah, that's the type of shit that they would do. I mean, the firing squad, they had a bunch of people just shooting at you. You can go to the wall right there and you could see all the where the bullets have all hit the wall and everything right there. I would like to go to this prison. And then you had your hangings.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's straightforward.
Okay.
There was a fire in 1904.
What?
And the fire was started by a prisoner in the Sea Wing. And the fire ended up quickly spreading, doing further damage. No, but further damage was prevented by the prisoners and the wardens, and the fire brigade worked together, and no one was killed during this one, actually. That wasn't cool. What's cool is when there's a bunch of crazy shit that goes down.
Like what?
Like the dead British soldiers.
Okay.
There ended up being 142 of them that ended up dying of carbon monoxide in there.
During the fire, or?
No, this was a different time.
Oh, okay.
Some people had so the British soldiers ended up taking over the place for a little bit. So there was a time during World War II where the prison served as a military facility, and the British soldiers were staying there, as well as they ended up housing some American soldiers there.
Yeah, this was during World War II. So this actually closed in 1930. There was just the prisoner population went down. The governor decided that it was time for it to close. What brought it back open in 1939, I believe it was, is World War II broke out, and they started using it as a military prison.
Right. You know what? I would lied when I said 142 soldiers. They're the soldiers that were living in room 142 were the ones that died.
There was 142 and 142. That's amazing.
That sounds about right for a prison, though.
Yes.
Sounds about right for that place. But yeah, no, it sounds like there was 3 people that died and the 4th survived.
Okay.
But they ended up executing some American prisoners. They were soldiers that were incarcerated over there in England for raping and murdering, and the U.S. military ended up executing them over there.
Yeah, you say it was like 18?
Yeah, World War, or was it World War II?
World War II.
Yes.
So in 1942, the Americans actually built onto the prison. They built the hanging room,
The hanging room.
and that's where these was it 18 soldiers were executed.
They don't even have a number of executions that were done in the early years. They didn't even keep track of anything. They didn't keep track of prisoners, how many days they were there, who died. They didn't keep track of any of that.
16 were hung. 2 of them were killed by firing squad
Of the U.S. Of the U.S.
of the
soldiers.
18 American soldiers. Yeah.
And so they didn't start keeping track of stuff till around like 1889. And then in 1889 to 1926, there were only 7 people executed.
Did you read the, so on those 16 Americans, some of them were double executions.
Double executions?
So yeah, so what a double execution is 2 condemned prisoners stood together on the gallows and were executed simultaneously when the trapdoor opened. So 2 people fell through the trapdoor at one time.
Okay, I've seen stuff like that. You've seen stuff where they have like 4 people on the gallows and they all drop them at the same time. I could see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what they were doing, they were burning the bodies and throwing them in unmarked graves for the people that were dying there and everything. And it sounds like that's what they did with the U.S. soldiers as well too.
Okay.
What else do they have going on there? There was there's some spooky stuff going on there.
Is there?
Oh yeah. Well, just like every other place, there's always a lady in white.
Yes.
So they have the White Lady of Shepton Mallet.
So the prison remained a military prison until 1966, which then it became a civilian prison once again, and it was a civilian prison up until
2013. And then they decided it cost them a lot of money keeping it in operation, so they closed it down. Because by that point, I think they only had 100 and something prisoners in there.
Yeah, and it's just at that point, yeah, it's more expensive when you run in this big prison that's got multiple cell wings and cell blocks, and you have a small population. That's why I closed down the first time.
But
so
you had over 400 years of people dying. I mean, those were just the executions. I'm sure there was a whole bunch of disease still that was just running rampant because there was all sorts of diseases going on in there.
Well, like we said originally, when you had 14 people crammed in these small little rooms and the life expectancy was about 3 months. Yeah, people were dying left and right for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
Whether they were being murdered by other inmates, disease, whatever.
There was rats running all over people, and lice running rampant in there. And then,
in the 16, 17, 1800s, they didn't really keep records of all these deaths.
Right.
So there's probably thousands upon thousands of bodies buried in this place.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, families ended up dying in there together. Because sometimes, back then, if a single mother went to prison for something, like if she stole an apple, that's taking an apple from a tree even.
Yeah.
Then you can go to prison for a couple days.
Yep.
And if you're a single mother, your kids are going to go to prison with you. And you're going to get thrown in a cell with a bunch of strangers.
Because you're all thieves, guilty by association.
Well, yeah, who else is going to watch your kids?
Nobody.
What else they would do, too, is if you owed money for something, like a debt, then you're going to prison and you're going to work off your debts. It was weird back then. So glad I'm alive now.
Yes. Me too, because otherwise I'd be doing this podcast with a ghost.
Right?
Ghosty. I'm doing it with a ghosty.
You are doing it with a ghosty.
Doing it with a ghosty. That's the name of the episode.
So anyways, this lady, that lady in white of Shepton Mallet.
What? Lady in white? That's
White
unheard
lady.
of.
Or you can call her the White Lady.
There's a lady in white? That's unheard of. I've never heard of that anywhere ever.
Then let's call her the White Lady.
Okay.
So this they say it's haunted by a white lady who was thought to be the ghost of a female prisoner who murdered her fiancé in the late 18th century. She was facing execution for the murder, and at some point she must have deeply regretted her deed. The night before her execution, she asked for her wedding dress to be brought to her. She wore it in bed, but the next morning she was found dead. People claim she must have died of a broken heart, and her ghost has been seen in several areas of the prison. But A Wing is her favorite place to haunt. And in the 1950s, a paranormal investigation took place because no one wanted to work the night shift there anymore.
So yeah,
In the 50s, They did an investigation in the 50s?
Yeah.
Who did that? Who
I
was
don't
doing it in
know.
the 50s?
Hans Holzer, maybe.
They were just probably doing a seance.
Maybe. I know in the A wing, so there was 4 officers in 1966 that refused to work the night duty there. They said they often smelled a sweet perfume, and they would get strange gusts of wind that would come through the cell block. And all 6 of these officers talked about the lady in white. And they even, like, when they did an autopsy, or they did the post-mortem inspection, or whatever you want to call it, they could not find a cause of death for this woman. And what I thought was funny is watching Paranormal Lockdown, Katrina kind of said the same thing I did when you mentioned the lady in white. She's like, I've been to a lot of places and everyone's got a lady in white, so we got to check the validity of this story.
Yeah. So there actually was somebody who did wear her wedding dress and everything. Is that what they said?
They said the exact same thing. There was the lady killed her fiance, and the story goes that she died of a broken heart.
I'm pretty sure she had some kind of way of killing. She probably had some poison or...
Quite possibly. And this is in the 60s, so they might not have had a way to detect if she poisoned herself or not. I don't know.
So there's also an apparition of a Private Lee Davis. And he's been seen by several people, and he's one of the executed servicemen, U.S. servicemen.
So he's often seen in the hanging building, or the hanging shed, which is the one we mentioned the Americans built in 1942. Mm-hmm. So they actually talked about him on Paranormal Lockdown as well. The tour guide Paul had an experience with Private Davis.
And is that the one where he got burned or something?
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
Do you have more information on Private Davis? Why he was there?
Rape and murder.
Yes. So he took 2 women. He took 2 girls out for the night, shot one of them, and raped the other one. He was shortly after he was court-martialed and sentenced to death. The morning of his execution, when he was brought up to the gallows, and it finally sunk in that like he's gonna die. His knees kind of buckled and he got scared, obviously, and his last words were, "Oh my God, I'm going to die." So the tour guide Paul, when he dug up this information, he's like the historian of the prison. When he got this information, the first time he was telling the story was in the hanging shed, and as he said the word "die," when he was saying, what Davis said was, "I'm going to die." As soon as he said the word "die," he felt this really sharp pain in his left hand, and he looked down, and there was a burn mark there, as if someone put a cigarette out on his hand.
Yep, and he still had the scar.
He still has the scar. Yes.
That's pretty wild. And I mean, that's something new. You don't hear about shit like that. That was pretty good. So there was also these Cray twins.
Yes.
They were gangsters that were held there in the early 50s that ended up getting executed there.
And these, no, they weren't executed.
Oh, they weren't executed there?
No, sir, they were not.
Oh, yeah. One died.
One died in a hospital,
yep.
And the other one...
One was a heart attack.
One was actually released.
Yeah, one was released, and the other was a heart attack in the hospital, right?
Yes.
And so what I don't understand...
So you had Ronald and Reginald Cray. They did spend at least 6 months in C Block.
And what I don't get is why they talk about their spirits being there.
As I was kind of researching a little bit about the Cray twins, I don't either. I do know that spirits tend to haunt places that were familiar to them. Now, as far as like the twins, they were identical twin brothers. And this is what kind of made them famous in England, because there was a lot of gangsters that were brothers back in the day, but these were the only ones that were like identical twins. This is why they kind of gained notoriety. They were part of a gang called the Firm, and they were the foremost perpetrators of organized crime from the late 1950s until 1967 when they were finally caught. Some of the crimes that they were involved in at the time was murder, armed robbery, arson, protection rackets, gambling, and assaults. So Ronnie was actually committed to the Broadmoor Hospital in 1979. He ended up dying there in 1995 due to a heart attack.
Yeah.
So he was at the prison for what, 11 years? Yeah, 11 years or 12 years. He was in the prison. Died in 1995 at the hospital. Okay.
Yeah.
So that one, it's kind of...
So yeah, he died in the hospital at the prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
His brother Reggie was actually... he was still incarcerated at the time of his brother's death. When Ronnie died, they actually let him out for a couple of days so he can go to the funeral and then put him right back in prison. He was released in 2000 for good behavior, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 weeks after he was released from the prison, he died of bladder cancer. So he was actually diagnosed with the cancer while in prison.
Okay.
And they told him it was going to be terminal. So, yeah, shortly after he was released from prison, he died. So he was in prison from 1967 to 2000. So, was that 33 years?
Okay, so they did spend a significant amount of time there. And
So,
one of them
like I
did
said,
die there.
people, well, neither one of them, well, the hospital, I don't know if it was at the prison or if it was somewhere else off. But, yeah, they say that spirits haunt places that are familiar to them, not necessarily where they died, which is why cemeteries, sometimes they haunt their bodies. This was why cemeteries are haunted, because no one dies in a cemetery. Usually. But, yeah, when Paranormal Lockdown was doing their investigation in C Wing on their second night, because they're there for 3 nights, they did use the Echo Box in the cell that the brothers were supposedly incarcerated in. And they were asking questions, and the name Cray did come through the Echo Box.
Okay.
So it is possible, at least one of them.
No, I get it. I could see
they had
that
another
being there.
brother that also served time there, and he was released in 1975. So at least 3 different Crays.
Well, for the amount of time that they spent there, I could see why their spirit
Yeah.
would still be there. Especially towards the end of their life.
Another thing that happened there, I'm assuming this is 2018 when this happened, because this is when the episode aired, and they talked about how the historian guy was saying how it had happened just a few months before they recorded the episode. There was 6 renovators in there doing work on C Wing, and they said they saw a soldier walk right past them, and he kind of went down the corridor and veered off to the right. And at the time, it was just the renovators were the only ones in the building. There shouldn't have been anybody else there.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Well, they say they see spirits, they see shadow people. Know what else went on in there? A shit ton of escapes.
Yeah, there was probably, like 30 listed on that?
Yeah, there's a shit ton of escapes.
There was escapes and attempted escapes.
Well, so first one was first listed one, 1765. This guy was in prison for sheep stealing, and he ended up getting recaptured 12 days after 12 days. Sorry, and then in 1776, 10 years later, Mary Harris broke out, and she was still free about a year later. And then there was a reward for her capture, and it was 20 guineas. But it doesn't say anything about her ever getting recaptured, though. Sounds like she made it out.
Maybe. I don't know. I would turn somebody in for 20 guineas.
Yeah, that's big money.
Yeah. What's a guinea?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I would totally turn you in for 20 guineas, though.
And then in 1819, there was a James Thompson who escaped, and he was caught in Bath on the 23rd of March of 1820. So he was out for a few months. He had a good 5-month stint out free. Oh, this one, December 1835. 4 prisoners. They attempted to escape from a prison chapel, but were prevented from doing so.
Okay.
The prison chapel, huh? 1860, a prisoner named Judge escaped through the 2-foot wide tunnel which carried the prisoner treadwheel shaft to the mill on the outside of the prisoner wall. He was later captured in Shaftesbury. Doesn't say how long, but...
No more treadmill.
Yeah.
You gotta get rid of that thing.
1866, Daniel James escaped through the roof and over the wall. He was recaptured by midday. 12th of January, 1878, Samuel Glover Fudge escaped, and he was recaptured and at the assize held in what the hell? Anyways, he was sentenced to an additional 3 weeks of hard labor.
Okay.
That was really weird to say. Ass size?
Sure. Size. As eyes. Aziz?
Yeah. But anyways, there was quite a bit there, right? There was another one to see. 1966, a convict in prison for larceny and burglary escaped whilst engaged in repairing prison staff accommodation. He was found later the same day having a drink in the King William Inn.
That's what I would do.
1968, 2 prisoners in an outside working party, again repairing staff accommodation, made off. Doesn't talk about recapturing them. May 1970, once again, a prisoner in an outside working party escaped his escorts. He was apprehended in the town center a little over 2 hours later. In 76, 3 inmates escaped through a barred toilet window of their dormitory and made it to the roof and then escaped over a lower roof. Oh, they did some parkour to get out.
Parkour before it was a thing.
Then summer of 77. 3 men made their escape through the window of the plastics molding workshop. A 4th attempted to escape but was prevented. One of the successful escapees was caught fairly quickly, and the 2nd was finally apprehended in Bridgewater after hijacking a police car and forcing the officer at knife point to drive him away. The 3rd remained at large until his arrest 3 months later for burglary. Damn, he couldn't stay out. 1981, the lock on a cell door was found to have been sawed off, but no one escaped from the prison. Weird. Damn, there's a whole bunch of these.
Yeah, I told you there's like 30.
Let's do the last one.
You gonna read them all?
The last one. A prisoner in 1991. This is the last escape attempt. A prisoner in an outside working party escaped after asking to use the toilet. Never to be seen again.
At the prison.
But this place sounds like it's pretty easy to get out of this place for as big as it was and as tall as those walls were. Those walls were huge.
This is true. That just shows you that the British are better at escaping prison than Americans.
Yeah. Very much so. Or they just suck at building prisons.
I'm going to go with they're better at escaping. So, yeah. Another ghost that people have said they've seen in the Victorian exercise yard, which is this big courtyard, like right in the middle of the prison. People said they saw a lady wearing a hooded cloak, and she looked all upset, and she was looking around, and she just kept saying, "Where are the ferns? Where are the ferns?" That's all she said. And then right in front of their faces, she just vanished. Like it was one of those, like they walked around the corner and was gone. Like this person just disappeared right there, right in front of everybody.
That would be pretty wild to see that.
It would be.
I mean, there was Nick Roth and Katrina were seeing a bunch of shadow people too walking down.
They saw a lot of shadow people in the hallways inside the prison. When they were out in the courtyard, they did see a woman, what looked like a woman, and they went to go talk to her, and they saw her like kind of running down the corridor and then ran around the corner and was gone.
But they say this is the most haunted prison in...
Well, then it must be true.
I believe it.
Because it's the most haunted prison ever. Just like all of them.
All of them are the most haunted.
I mean, this one, like, it is pretty old, so it's a good chance that's actually accurate.
Well, there's a lot of... The doors just start slamming.
Yeah, well, they were walking around right when they started their investigation. They were hearing loud banging noises. The doors were slamming all over the place.
I could hear some voices, too. I don't know if they heard it, but I remember one time they were calling out to something. It sounded like I heard something, some like just weird voices making noise.
I think they did hear voices. I don't remember, though.
I know they did get some EVPs.
They got some pretty interesting stuff. So they were using a device I've never heard of before. This is called the Geoport. It's very similar if you've ever seen Huff Paranormal's Portal.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically you take an SB7 spirit box, more or less, connect it to some like reverb pedals and some speaker. It's essentially is what it's doing is eliminating the white noise, so all you're hearing is what the spirits are supposedly saying to you. Okay.
Yeah.
I did look this up. You can buy the Geoport. It is at georgebrownlabs.com. If you have about $2,000 you're willing to drop on a piece of equipment. If I remember correctly, Huff Paranormal was a lot cheaper for his portal, which basically did the same thing. And then I think it was also on Huff Paranormal. He actually gave you like an Amazon shopping list of the stuff to buy so you could build your own for a lot less. But what they did is they were using it the first night. They kept hearing the banging noises and like knockings and whisperings and stuff. And they thought it was like directing into a room. So they went into one of the rooms, and once they got there, it didn't really stop responding. So they decided to go up to the hanging room. And they wanted to talk to Private Lee Davis about
burn.
The burn. And at one point, they're like, "Did you burn Paul?" And I heard something come through their geoport. And what I found was interesting is they didn't respond to it at all. So they didn't hear it. Like, I watched the whole episode wondering if they were going to go back to it, like in their evidence. And yeah, they never mentioned it. So to me, it sounded like the spirit responded like right away when they asked if they burned Paul. And I thought I heard something, so I actually went and found it. And I'm going to play it for you here real quick to see what you think. And I think it was this one. Yeah. Let me start this over. I'm just gonna. Okay, here we go. This is when he asked, "Did you burn Paul?"
Did you burn Paul?
I'll play it one more time.
Did you burn Paul?
Okay, so to me, like I wasn't even like looking at the screen when this went on. I think I was ordering DoorDash, and I heard that and I looked up and I was like expecting them to respond because to me it sounded very clear when it came through. Now going back and listening to it now, it's very quiet, it's very subtle. But when I first heard it, to me it was very clear. And so it's literally right after you hear on the geophone, you hear Mel's voice. Mm-hmm. And it is kind of quiet. But what I heard was, yes, I did. When they said, "Did you burn Paul?" I heard, yes, I did. And originally I thought it was kind of a laugh. But when I played it for you before we started recording, you said it sounded like he said a lot.
Yeah, it sounded like he said, yeah, a lot.
So I'll play it one more time.
Did you burn Paul?
So I can see that last thing being a lot. To me, it kind of sounds like he's laughing.
Or like, yes.
Yes, I did. Ha ha ha. That's kind of what I heard, but I could also see it being a lot. So I thought it was interesting because to me, like I said, when I first heard that, it was very clear, but they didn't respond to it. They didn't talk about it at all. So
right. I wonder why.
I don't know.
They just missed it. That's
why. They probably missed it. Yeah, I thought I actually heard something there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, because anything that comes through that should be something that's making it through all the.
Right.
There's a bunch of stuff that's keeping random white noise out.
Yes.
So anything that does come through should be acknowledged.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was kind of subtle and quick, so maybe I don't know, maybe they just didn't notice it. But to me, it sounded like the spirit responded to him, saying, "Yes, I did."
I hear it.
So, first night of lockdown, when they go to sleep, I believe Katrina went over to like C wing, and Nick decided to sleep in A wing. And that first night for Nick was like crazy. Did you watch this episode?
Yeah, and like I remember them talking about how cold it was, like that he couldn't sleep. But then there was just crazy noise going on his voice recorder all night.
Yeah, well, not just the voice recorder, like actual, like he woke up. Like there was a loud banging noise and it startled him awake. And he sits there and he's listening for a second and then it starts banging again to the point where he actually jumped out of his cot and ran and grabbed his camera so he can go investigate.
Yeah.
But he heard these loud banging noises, like the doors were slamming all over the place. And it even sounded like loud footsteps, like running down the hallway towards him. And needless to say, he had a hard time sleeping that night. Mm-hmm. And then they did go back the next day. He was listening to his recorder. He was hearing voices as well as all these loud banging and stuff. So he was audibly hearing the voices. They go back and listen to his digital audio recorder the next morning. And you can hear, you can't make out what anything is being said, but you can hear the whisperings in his audio recorder as if something got right up on it and was whispering right into his recorder. It wasn't like in the distance or anything. It wasn't like this where it sounds like he's yelling from across the room. Like it was like really close. That was the second night.
I would want to.
Or the first night.
There. I'd want to go spend the night there. We should go.
They spent 3 nights there, 2 nights there, 3 nights there. Yeah.
72 hours.
72 hours. So the second day, I got that not too much happened while they were out in the courtyard. They were using the geoport and they thought it said underground. I said they also thought they saw someone walking through the courtyard while they were there. Nick actually went into, I guess when they were doing some renovations, they found some old cell blocks that had been walled up, some old cell jails.
Yeah, they had where it's like crawling room only.
Yeah. So Nick went into one of these, and as he was going in, like something hissed at him.
Right by his face.
Yeah. And then so he decided he freaked out and decided that's a good place to set up his cot and sleep.
Yeah, on top of a bunch of rubble and stuff.
Yes. Not a whole lot happened other than that second night. The third night was crazy. Like, I think the third night, some of the interaction they were getting was a lot cooler, I guess, than the first night with all that loud banging and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So the third night, they spent their whole investigation in the hanging room. Mm-hmm. They set up a couple devices. One looked like they just set up a projection screen to a laptop or something. They were using something called the Angelus, and they were also using the Geoport that night. I looked up the Angelus. To me, it looked like it was just software that's made by Extreme Senses that does video sweeping, kind of like instead of doing audio sweeping like FM, AM, FM, it does video sweeping to kind of create the white noise, and it also has like a phonetic mode as well. And as far as I could tell, on their website, this software looked like it was about $20.
But I don't know. They're going to manipulate the images to create their own image or something? I
guess that's the theory behind it. I would have to read more up on this.
I'd have to see it actually work before I try to invest money in it.
So, I mean, like it's only $20.
It's still.
So, I know that they had the projector screen up on the wall so they could see it better instead of having to stare at the little laptop screen. But it also had the phonetic mode. It would actually, like, I've seen this on some of the, like, the free apps you can get, like the Ghost Box, where it'll actually, it's supposed to be like a spirit box, but it actually put the words up on the screen too. So this actually had that feature on the software. So when it said words, you could actually see it on the screen. Mm-hmm. What I thought was interesting is while they were talking and doing their investigation, they would hear like knocking noises, and it almost seemed like it was responding kind of intelligently. So at one point, Katrina was like, "Okay, well, it seems like you're responding to what we're saying. So if you can you do like one knock for no and two knocks for yes?" And then they asked, "Are you in the room?" And they get two knocks. So then they started asking more yes or no questions, and it sounded like it was responding with knocks to the questions that they were asking, which I thought was really cool because we've done the shave and haircut thing. We have a video of it on YouTube of something making your not K2, but one of your EMF meters beep twice when your brother was doing shaving a haircut. So I thought it was really interesting that things were knocking in response, giving like one knock for no, two for yes. And then they decided they're going to pull out the geophone as well at this point. And while they're pulling out the geophone, the name Cassandra came up on the Angelus. Mm-hmm. So then they start asking, is your name Cassandra? And you hear it kind of say yes on the Geoport. And then they asked, what crime are you in here for? And it gives a response. And I have that one as well. I'll play here in just a second. As soon as I can find it. I have it. I think it's this one.
Why were you placed in here? What was your crime?
Thief.
So they think it says thief. The captions on the screen said, "I'm a thief." I'll play that one more time. So they're asking, what was your crime, Cassandra? Why are you here?
Why were you placed in here? What was your crime?
Oh, I can hear that. I'm a thief.
So yeah, it's shortly after Nick says right there. The whispering is Nick saying right there. Mm-hmm. So I'll play it one more time.
Why were you placed in here? What was your crime?
So that was another one that I thought was actually really good. And then they go on to start asking, and they're about to ask Cassandra another question. Katrina's getting ready to ask Cassandra another question. And I thought this was probably the clearest I've ever heard from this episode for the Geoport. This is probably the clearest thing I've heard come through it.
This actually did something that this program wasn't even meant to do.
Yeah, so if you've noticed, like in some of the other, the two other clips I've played already, the Geoport, and if you watch the episode, everything come through sounds like a male voice for some reason. And this is actually very different than what they've been getting the last couple nights, and this is actually very clear in my opinion. So I'll play it for you. They weren't really asking any questions. Like Katrina literally just said Cassandra, hadn't even asked the question yet, and then you hear this coming through.
And that even has an accent.
Yeah.
There's even a British accent or English accent in that.
I'm going to play it one more time.
Yeah.
Heard a clear tonal voice coming through.
So that little like noise is just the sound they edited into the show because they were replaying it at that point. But yeah, I think it was another one of those things. I was kind of writing the notes on my laptop, and that came through, and I was like, "Holy cow!"
Yeah, that one. It sounds just like I don't want to die.
I don't want to die.
And I mean, she pronounced the T's very sharply.
Definitely not from Utah.
Yeah, not from Utah. But even that English accent was in there.
Yes. So they started trying to investigate that further. They thought it was Cassandra that said that. They ended up back in the room where Nick got hissed at. And their cameraman Rob and Katrina both heard like a woman's voice when they were standing outside that room. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of, activity died. There was nothing else after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that one was really, really clear.
The most clear. It's on one of those things to have it come through with that different voice and with that accent. It was amazing.
Like if you heard the other two where I played, where it says I'm a thief and they think they're talking to Cassandra, like everything coming through. Like when they thought they heard it saying underground on the second night.
It's always the same voice.
It's always the same voice. So this, like you said, it wasn't designed to do that. Like it's not supposed to have that woman's voice.
So that was very significant
really cool.
and very pronounced.
Yes.
She's very eloquent.
So definitely haunted.
Definitely haunted.
Would visit.
Would love to visit. I think I never even really I haven't even heard of this place until just the other day.
When did you text me? That's when I heard of it.
Well, actually, it was just a couple weeks ago. Yeah, a couple weeks ago for me, and then I held on to that thought until I sent it to you.
Like a week ago.
Yep,
and I'm like, okay. And what is this place?
And it had to do based off that EVP.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When I heard that, I was like, what is this place?
Yeah, so we're going to go there.
So, yeah, we're going there now.
Yeah. Along with all the other places we're going.
Well, we're just going to go on a tour. You know what? We can do that. We'll retire soon. You ready to retire?
Heck yes, I am.
Let's do that. Let's just go on a ghost tour extravaganza.
Okay.
Yeah, and our ghost yacht.
Yeah, on our ghost yacht. Yes. In order to get the ghost yacht, you should follow us on our social medias at evp.pod at Facebook and Instagram. If you have a story from the Shepton Mallet prison that you want to share with us,
it's a mouthful, huh?
Yes. You can email us at evp.pod@gmail.com. And then if you want to go on ghost hunting adventures and you want to buy equipment, check out our affiliate link to ghoststop.com.
Well, everybody, ghosts, play that.
Peace out, butterflies.
This is the EVP Podcast.